Today's text comes from the book of Judges, chapter 6, verses 36 through 40. In your pew Bible, it is on page 195. Judges chapter 6, 36 through 40. This is a popular story. And it's a story of Gideon. And when we hear the name Gideon, we probably think of the Bibles that are in the hotels that we go to. And there's a reason why. And we'll learn a little bit about Gideon today. Then Gideon said to God, "In order to see whether you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said, I am going to lay a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry all the ground, then I shall know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said." And it was so. When he rose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece, he wrung enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not let your anger burn against me. Let me speak one more time. Let me please make trial with the fleece just one more. Let it be dry only on the fleece, and on all the ground let there be dew." And God did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there was dew. The word of the Lord. Amen. Gideon, oh Gideon, he is such an interesting character. He is one who is able to test God. He's one who's willing to push the boundaries of God. What we didn't read in this text, which happened a little before, was that he saw the angel of the Lord underneath a tree, and he came to the angel, and the angel told him that he was called and that God was going to deliver the people through him. But now let's take it one step back even farther. As I have said regularly, Israel in the Old Testament is either good with God, not so good with God, or in exile, or being, how can I say this, being punished, or God's presence was removed from them. For they were always in the constant cycle of finding other gods and other things. And that's a difficult situation because it was God who brought them out of Egypt. It is God who freed them from slavery. It is God who called them. And yet they find other things and other ways and worship other gods. God with a little g, while their God is a capital G. They continuously push God, push the boundaries with God. And in this situation, the Midianites have come in and conquered the land of Israel. So the people of Israel are left without food because they being the Midianites, have taken all of their food, all of their supplies. They've cut off the things that allow them to eat and to live. They've cut them off. And guess what the people now are doing? They're crying out to God, the God who freed them from Egypt. They realize their mistakes. They realize that maybe, just maybe, they were worshiping the wrong God. And so God calls Gideon and says, "Blessed are you, for you will deliver Israel." And how do you think Gideon responds to this? Does Gideon say, "Finally, God, thank you, I'm going to go and conquer"? Is that how we normally respond when someone says, "You are blessed and called. You are going to do a great work. Your words are needed here"? Do we ever say, "All right," and respond with gladness and say, "This is what I'm going to do"? Most of the time we try to pass on the baton and say, maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you meant Rhea. Maybe you didn't mean angel, you meant someone else. But here, Gideon responds in just that way. He says, This cannot be true. For how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least of my family. So his response was, me? My family is the least among my tribe, and I am the least among my family, so that puts me at the very bottom of all people in my tribe. But God has an answer for that. God says, the Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike down the Midianites, every one of them. The first part of that sentence is the most important part. But I will be with you. It doesn't matter who you are. God is with you. Therefore, it doesn't matter how weak you think you are. God is with you. It doesn't matter how lowly you think you are. God is with you. Regardless of how you may feel not intellectual enough, God is with you. The key is not that I am the most prepared person, the most intelligent, the strongest, the best looking, the greatest person in the history of people. No, that's not who God is calling. God is calling you because God is with you. So it doesn't matter about you or your traits or your weakness. As Paul says, in your weakness, God is made strong. In our weakness, in the things that we look down upon ourselves, God is made stronger. God's love is made perfect. So Gideon, oh Gideon, the weakest of his family, the worst of his tribe, the lowliest, he calls himself. But it doesn't matter because it's not about him, it's about God. And I remind us of that because too often we think ourselves either too great or too lowly. We think of ourselves as struggling just to make it through the day. So how can God use me? How can God use me? I am nothing. When I was in youth fraternity back in the day, we had a saying, and it was Christian, but Christ was capitalized, and the I-A-N stood for I am nothing. For it is not about me. It is not about us. It is about God in us. It is about God around us. It is about God through us. It is about God so that the glory can be returned to God. Not our glory, but God's glory. So Gideon is reminded of that. So Gideon says, okay, I believe you, but I just want to test you a little bit more. I'm going to put this fleece outside, and I want the dew of the morning to only be on the fleece and nowhere else. And so he puts it out, goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, the fleece is full of dew. And he's able to wring it out to fill up almost a bowl. So let's think about this. So he saw an angel of God under a tree, and he needed more proof. He put a fleece out and said, may the dew only be on the fleece and nowhere else. And he woke up the next morning, and it was. So do you think he would believe by now? Do you think he would understand by now? No, he goes one more time and says, all right, now I'm going to put out the fleece, and now I want the dew to be everywhere else, but the fleece to be dry. And he wakes up the next morning, and it's so. The fleece was dry, and everything else was moist with dew. I think if we leave it up to him, it'd be like the cartoon that says, now I want half of the fleece to be wet and half to be dry, just to confirm that you want me to do this. It seems like he was pushing God, not pushing God to test God necessarily, but maybe pushing God far enough that God will do what many of us do and say, forget it, I'll do it myself. How often do we do that? We ask someone can you close this chair? And then they start making excuses, and we turn around and say, forget it, don't worry about it, I'll close the chair myself. And we close it and put it up. Seems like he's pushing God to see if maybe he can get out of it almost. But God said, no, it is you. It is the least of. It is the one who no one suspects. It is the one that no one looks at that will free the people. And in this text, right before our text today, we see that the very first thing that he does is pull down the altar that was created to Baal, the god who was a golden calf, the same God who they struggled with when they left Egypt, the same God who they continued to run into and for some reason worship again and again, making the same mistake over and again. And so as I was thinking about this, I was like, how can we apply this to our lives? Because I know that none of us here ever make the same mistakes ever again and again. I know that here, everyone here makes a mistake and learns the lesson and moves on, learned that lesson, right? I can't fully agree because I make the same mistakes over and again.
You still learn a lesson from
it. You learn a lesson, but have you learned if you continue to do?
Oh, stupidity goes right.
Thank you, because it does. Sometimes it does. We struggle making the same mistakes over and again. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, isn't it? And that's what we do. We tend to do the same things over and again and then wonder, why isn't my life changing? We think of ourselves as lowly and then we wonder, well, why haven't I moved up in life? We think of ourselves less than and then wonder, why can't I get that promotion? We think of ourselves as the littlest of the tribe, the worst of the tribe, and then we wonder, why haven't I gotten any bigger or any better? God is calling us to bigger and better things. God is calling us to move on what's happening around us. The less we do, the more we inwardly look, the less we are able to bless. The more that we push God, not to test God and confirm what God had said, but instead to push God to the limit where God says, all right, I'll call another church, or I'll call another person. I'll do something else just so you can stop with all of this. We try to push God that far. But luckily for us, God is patient. And God knows our fears. And God knows the things that we are trying to do and the things we are trying to get out of. And God knows that it is not about us. It is about God in us. It is about God around us. It is about God moving in the midst of. Are we able and willing to allow God to use us? Gideon pushed, but God didn't let him go. Gideon tried to get out of it, but God didn't let him get out, because in the very next chapter, they bring an army together, and 22,000 people, soldiers ready to fight. And so Gideon must be feeling really good about it. But God says, that's too many people. And God said, offer anyone who wants to go home, and 10,000 go home. So he has 12,000 soldiers now. And God says, that's still too many soldiers. And so he says, take them to the river, and whoever kneels down to drink water, you let them go. But anyone who gets down and sips the water with their lips like a dog, they will stay. And guess how many stayed? 300. It was not about Gideon or all of the soldiers, for it was with 300 soldiers that Gideon freed Israel and conquered the Midianites. It's not about our great numbers, especially for us here as we struggle, as we continue to grow one person at a time. Sometimes we struggle with the idea that we are little. Gideon starts with 22,000 soldiers, and God conquers a whole army, a whole nation with 300. It is not about how big we are or we're not. It is about God in us. It is about God around us. It is about God doing in the midst of. It is about us allowing God to use us as God's instruments. We are very much like Gideon. We have excuses. We have excuses like there's no tomorrow, right? We can have an excuse for everything and anything. But it's not about that. It's about God in us. Instead of making excuses, what if we said, God, what would you want us to do? God, how do you want us to respond? God, how would you have us respond? It's not about lighting the world on fire. It's about being the spark that starts a fire. It's not about being the brightest light. It's about allowing others and being the electricity to allow those lights to shine. It is not about going out and changing all the world in one shot. It is about being the pebble that starts the ripple effect in the water of life. God is calling us. God is calling you. God is calling each and every one of you to be the stone that starts the ripple that begins to change the world. Though you may feel the lowliest, though you may feel the weakest, though you may feel the least intelligent, it is not about you. It is about God within you. It is about God around you. It is about God through you. It is about opening our hearts and minds to God, to allow God to use us for his glory. It is about allowing us to let God live through us in our world today. Amen.